Hello friends, today's lecture is on an Italian playwright, and I'll be as usual holding a discussion with you, and I'll be raising questions for you to consider. And the name of the playwright that we have today is Luigi Pirendello. It's a slightly difficult name to pronounce, but keep in mind that he was one of the most major playwrights of the 20th century Europe, not just Italy, where he was born, and he left impact on the dramatic tradition in France, in England, in the rest of the countries. And he was born into a rich family, which also saw later some economic crisis, but his studies were not hampered. He did his PhD at the age of 22 or so, not from an Italian university, but from the German University of Bonn, because that place he liked better than the institutions in his own country. So look at the name and also look at the play that we'll be discussing in general, but I'll be talking about Pirandello's vision, Pirandello's ideology, Pirandello's role in the 20th century drama, its development and evolution. Think of the title that he gives to his play, this particular play, and that will raise a large number of questions for us to consider. It is called 6 Characters in Search of an Author. Imagine this kind of a title. We have not seen characters moving around. It's always men and women who move around. But do characters also move around? This is the question that you have to ask yourself. This is the question that I have to ask from myself and attempt an answer. What is a character and what is a human being? How are they different? And whether characters also can be seen to be moving around, and why do they do so? The reason he gives is that they are searching for an author. So the author will give them a shape, will present them in the text, and later on it will be projected through the efforts of a whole team of people who are associated with drama, dramatic production, and the first job of the characters is to search for an author. I think it's a very profound title, and in fact, if you are a writer, if one is a writer, then one should face this problem: what kind of characters he can pick up, and whether characters are there in society or whether they are born in the mind of the author. So all these questions are raised here by this particular title of the play, and let me also tell you that because the characters are free and they are moving around, and they are moving around in search of an author. So who is the author? Well, my answer is the author is Luigi Pirandello. So are they searching for him? Where will they find him? And what will he do with them? Therefore, it's a very problem kind of a play, and a play which would have formed itself in the mind of the author over a long period of time. For instance, he was thinking about this play when he started writing, became active in literature in the early years of the 20th century. And then, there were different phases in his life, and in each phase he would think of this particular question, and finally, in the seed form, as I have indicated, the play was there in the early 20th century, but it took 20 long years for Pirandello to take up the theme and to put these characters in this particular play, which is called actually 6 Characters in Search of an Author. So one more word about it, and then we proceed to the general view of Pirandello in the first half of the lecture. What does search mean? Why should we search for something? And is search important for the writer? Because we as audience, we as readers, we as even critics and teachers, teaching drama, let's say in a classroom in Delhi University, what does search mean for us? That these characters are searching. So can search also be caught? Can search be identified and given a shape, and that we are seeing in this play not just the characters and what they face, but also the search the search for an author. So think of these things, and authors are indeed important. And sometimes, people search for an author to give expression to their views. In fact, this becomes very important in the case of, countries like India, that, in the early 20th century, when India was a colony of Britain, then, people would always expect some writers to present them in literature. So in a way, they were searching for an author. There are authors in the 19th century in India, who were found through the search that society, in fact, conducted in the 19th century itself. Think of Tagore. Tagore, he was thinking for themes, and the themes were also searching for him. So that way, it's a two-way process, and I believe that a lot can be said on the, title itself of the play. So first, a few things about this writer. He is born in 1867, and he is born in Agrigento, Italy. He died in 1936. How many years? 33 and 36, 69 years. And he died in Rome, which means that he had finally achieved success, and he settled down in Rome as a playwright. And then, in order to appreciate his genius, in order to appreciate his role in literature in Italy and Europe, and in fact the rest of the world, then he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1934. So after 2 years of this acquisition of or winning of the prize, the person dies in 1936. So it's an important author. It's also well recognized. It is also well published. It is also well translated in different languages of the world. And indeed, it goes to the credit of the writer that in India also he would be translated into different languages, and he would inspire writers to write. And in India, his play, this particular play has been staged also. I watched the play, the staging of this play way back 3 or 4 decades ago, and the play was able to inspire the audience in spite of the fact that this is a highly intellectual play. So let me go over the other books that he has written. Generally, he wrote plays over 50, which is that's a long inning for him. That he writes 50 plays, and he wrote short stories. They were 100 plus. He wrote novels. They were 7, and he wrote poems. So imagine that all his life, from his 20s up to the time of death, he was all the time writing, wrestling, struggling, forming things, rejecting quite a few, and accepting others. And he was finding answer to the issues that were raised in the culture of his time in Italy, in Europe, and in the rest of the world. He represents drama. Let's consider this particular statement. He represents drama in which actors become inseparable and indistinct from the characters that they play. What does it mean? Actors are there on the stage, and they keep changing the plays, every year. The actors in films in India, and these actors are given different roles at different points of time in their lives. So, in this case, he says, for him and in his plays, what we notice is that the actors become inseparable and distinct from the characters. This generally doesn't happen. This might have happened in Hindi films, in Indian films, in the early part of the freedoms struggle that ended in 1947, and India became free. And then you could see that there were certain characters, like I can think of Balaraj Sahni. He would always be inseparable from his characters. The characters that he played were generally nice people, sweet people, quiet people, very inspiring. So one could think that perhaps this person was inseparable from the roles that he got in the films. So this person says theoretically means as a kind of a principle that you can't draw a line of distinction between the characters and the actors. And this really raises questions, which means that the character will be lived completely as a role by the actor, and the actor in doing that role will be inseparable from the role that he's playing. So if it's a truthful role, then he will remain truthful also on the stage, and he would appear to be just there, not merely as an actor, but as a character. So this kind of theory is contended by some writers in the 20th century. I would not go into that because there has been discussion, like in the plays of the German playwright Bertolt Brecht, who says that actors are actors and characters are characters, and the two generally remain separate. But no, so far as our writer Pirandello is concerned, actors are characters and vice versa. So they are indistinct and they are inseparable from the characters that they play. So you will see that this kind of a thing may be there in this particular play that we discuss, and that is maybe there also in the syllabus for you to study, and keep this question in mind. The other thing that is said about him is that he is an important innovator in modern drama. So modern drama itself is something new, and people didn't have it in the 19th century. He is born in the 19th century, and he was a good 33 years when the new century, knocked at the door. But then, he is a modern writer. Modern writer in the sense that he talks about the time in which he lived, and he would not, look back for any kind of inspiration. He would in fact look for problems that he faces in his life, and that his society faces in its own existence, and that the new problems then are taken up by the writer in his plays, and in a new way, in a way that was not there earlier in the literary tradition. So he is an innovator. He always experiments. He always innovates. He always makes things new and invents them. That is an innovator, and such a writer will not follow any tradition, but he will just carve out his own path. Higher studies in University of Bonn, I have mentioned this earlier, where he did his doctorate in philosophy. That is to be considered that he is a person who is of the philosophical bent. He did research in the area of philosophy, and all of us know that philosophy is abstract thought. You think not of the person, you think of the views that the person expresses. The writer also forms his own or her own impressions of the others whom he meets, comes across, and those things are philosophically then treated. So he did doctorate in philosophy. Now the next thing that I mention here is, and this is to be kept in mind, his wife had bouts of insanity later in life, which means that in the 19th century, in the late 19th century and in the 20th century, the mental state of a character, the mental state of a writer, the mental state of a member of the family, posed problems. People did not generally talk about these things in their writing, but then this person took it up also as a theme in some of his plays and short stories. And now that we know that his wife had this kind of insanity, she had a kind of madness. So he, in fact, thought of presenting that theme in a number of his plays, particularly in Henry IV, another play that he wrote, and that this became a point of contention for him. What is insanity? It's a state of mind of a person who doesn't adjust with the circumstances in which he or she, is born and is active. And since the mind of the person concerned and the tradition of the society do not gel with each other, therefore the society will call these people insane. But are they insane? Are they really mad? Or there is something wrong with society itself, which cannot accept a different point of view, a different mental makeup, and things like that. So this issue is pursued by the writer as a matter of course in literature, and a large number of people in the 20th century under his influence, whether they are there in France, whether they are there in England, whether they are in Italy itself, whether they are in Europe, in other countries, they also started thinking of insanity as an issue that should be taken up for depiction in the writings. So now I'll make a few points, and I'm keeping in mind the text that we have for us. The theme of his most characteristic work, already perceptible in his early short stories, the exploration of the tightly closed world of the forever changeable human personality. Now this is true about 6 characters in search of an author, as also about other plays of his. And what does this point in fact suggest? And just think of the words, that exploration of the tightly closed world. The world is tightly closed. The world does not open itself to others. The world generally keeps things under the wraps, behind a curtain, and one doesn't know what's happening in the world. But then the writer's job is to go to the other side of the issue, behind the curtain, beneath the surface, into the minds of the characters that one picks up for depiction, and then exploration happens. And then it's a new thing. It is not this way that writers took up their world as a challenge, and they tried to explore. Most of the writers till that time would look at the world, will form an opinion about it, whether it's a bad opinion or a good opinion, a critical opinion or an appreciative opinion, and then according to that opinion, the plot of the play or the short story or the novel or the theme of the poem would be finally formed. But in the case of this writer, the important thing was to explore, not to give answers. Just see how it works, how it happens, and what makes it, and how does one make it, and all these questions they are called exploration. So he devoted his time to the theme of exploration in his writing, and in 6 characters, in search of an author, is about exploration. Earlier I used the word search, and now I use the word exploration, that what the play says in the beginning is then explained, explored, questions are raised about it, and finally perhaps there is no answer. But then the questions are so important that people start thinking about the issues that are presented on the stage. And so far as the world is concerned, it's tightly closed. It does not allow you to enter it. And that's a sad part for the writer and the participants as citizens, because the world is not open. But then if the world is not open, it is the job of the writer to open it for the benefit of his own self, as well as for the viewers if one is a playwright, and for the readers if one is a novelist or a poet. So tightly closed world, and then see the characterization or the definition that he forms, that one forms about the world in which one is forced to live. The world is changeable, and the world consists of personalities that are changeable, and these personalities have to be studied by the writer. So this is what is suggested by the first point, that is the theme of this play as well as of the most of the writing that he did in his time. The second thing is wry nature of his realism. It's the realism. What realism is a very popular word in the 19th century literature as well as criticism. So he is a realistic writer, but in what way? And then the critics give the answer that it's a wry nature. What is a wry nature? Wry nature is peculiar, strange, something that appears to be unnatural. And you raise your eyebrows to understand what realism means. So he cannot be called a realistic author in the traditional sense of the word, but he is a realist writer. That's what some critics would say, and that this realism is not easy to get, is not easy to comprehend. It's a realism that once again makes you conscious about the society in which you live, and if that is the case, then of course the writing is realistic, because then you start thinking about it as a real phenomena, and your job is then to unravel the phenomena. The third point that I make is about him, acute psychological observation. This is important. As if, he's psychoanalyzing characters. This generally is not the case with writing in the 19th century and most of the writing of the 20th century also. But so far as he is concerned, he is studying the minds of the people, how they work, how they feel, how they expect others to follow their example. And if their examples are not followed, then why are they not followed? All these questions are dealt with at the level of the mind. So one goes into the feelings, the sensations, the apprehensions, the dangers, the suspicions. All these things appear to be non-existent, but for a writer, they are actually subject for psychology. So acute psychological observation that was later to be directed towards the exploration of his character's subconscious. So other words I have explained, but this particular word subconscious, I can just explain to you now that there is a conscious level of mind. All of us know it. You ask a question from somebody, and he or she answers the question, and that question, that answer actually tells about the conscious ideas. But behind the idea, something is there. Now writers can see this, that somebody is angry. But why is he angry? Somebody is happy. Why is he happy? And then you go into the lower layers of the mind, and you understand that subconscious is important. Subconscious is a subject that was not dealt with extensively in the early centuries, and particularly the early 19th century, but towards the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the first of the 20th century, then people started talking about the hidden desires, the suppressed desires. The person says one thing and means something else, or the person expresses happiness, but that happiness actually is hiding a large amount of pain that is there at the subconscious level. So the subconscious then in the 20th century became a popular theme, and this writer was mostly talking about it in his writings, and particularly in this particular play that we discuss. Then the theory of the subconscious personality, which postulates that, and it's now made clear of its own also. Let's think about it. What is subconscious? And what does it postulate? It proposes that what a person knows is the least part of what he is. A person doesn't know who he is, what is his role, why he is saying all those things. Do we ask this question from ourselves as we behave in life? I wonder if we do that, because most of us merely react to others' issues raised by others. But if one also starts thinking as to why one is saying all those things, and why is it that his words mean something different than he aims, then of course it is to be considered. And then there are many more things that I would say about this, but then I think we'll take up the issue of the play directly. But the last point that I make now is a demonstration in dramatic terms of the relativity of truth. Truth is not final and fixed; it is relative. It's in relation with other things that are connected with it. So that is called the relativity of truth, and a rejection of the idea of any objective reality, not at the mercy of individual vision. Individuals don't decide the reality, and objective reality is nothing like, he says, objective reality. It anticipates, he says, it is said about him, Pirandello's two great plays, and that straight away opens up the field of discussion for us, the six characters that we'll discuss, and also Henry IV, where he takes insanity as an issue. So to sum up the points made so far is that he is taking the reader and the viewer in the auditorium into an area which is unexplored so far, and where the mind of the human being will be the subject of discussion and analysis. Thank you.